Let's dive into the discussions shaping the nation.
Well, Taoiseach, today, as you know, as we all know, marks the beginning of the 50-hour protest by young Cara Darmody, and I, like others, want to welcome Cara and her father Mark to the gallery. Cara is an incredible campaigner for the rights of children with additional needs, and she's only 14 years old. Taoiseach, she's staging this protest, as you know, to raise awareness of what is an emergency, your government's failure to comply with the Disability Act. And I think of all that you said just now in response, that point you made, the status quo is not tenable. Of course the status quo is not tenable. It's not tenable for children like Cara's brothers. It's not tenable for the many thousands of children, 15,000 children nationally, who are now languishing on waiting lists, awaiting an assessment of needs. And in breach of your government's own law. When the HSE receives an application, Taoiseach, it's set out in law that the assessment of need must be carried out within 6 months. My colleague, Deputy Alan Kelly, has received responses to parliamentary questions which reveal that in the first quarter of this year, that legally binding 6-month deadline was missed in a shocking 93% of cases. 93% is an extraordinarily high rate of failure, Taoiseach. It's a desperate embarrassment. And it's an ongoing problem that you've inherited from your own outgoing government, the previous government. And there can be no passing of the buck. You said there would be a step change. You used that language again just now. That's not what we have seen. Taoiseach, it's 2 years to the week, this week, that we in Labour brought a Dáil motion, again with the great support and encouragement of Cara Darmody, setting out a plan, a constructive plan to take on and address these waiting lists and to treat the chronic delay in diagnoses like the national emergency it is. And on that day, many of us will recall that in this House, then Minister of State Anne Rabbitte made a powerful speech, acknowledging responsibility for failure and acknowledging also profound impact upon children and families. And Anne Rabbitte made a commitment that if capacity did not improve, she would adopt our Labour proposal to reimburse parents for the price of private assessments as an emergency and constructive way of addressing this appalling shortfall. Taoiseach, I think we all took that significant announcement as a sign that you and your government would place a greater focus on resolving this. But the stories and accounts we're hearing from parents and families across the country and the waiting list figures really say otherwise. We understand you won't oppose tonight's cross-party motion, and that's welcome, but non-opposition is not enough, because you didn't oppose our Labour motion 2 years ago on this very topic. You made all the right noises then, but the problem has got worse since then. Deputy Kelly's PQ responses show that in the first quarter of this year, just 1,412 assessments were carried out. A tiny number, a fraction of the need, when we see more than 15,000 children overdue an assessment, a number expected to grow to 25,000 by the end of this year. So Taoiseach, I am asking you, as Cara asks, when will you treat this as the national emergency it is? When will we see those waiting lists properly and effectively addressed?
To respond. It's very clear, Deputy, and you know that one of the reasons why very, very quickly in this government we established the need for a national school or a therapy in school service, which we have now commenced and taken a decision to do, was because of the inadequacy of the response within the health service itself. The challenges that many CDNT teams are experiencing in recruitment and in retaining therapists, and wider general issues, because the issue is not one of resources actually, the issue is one of capacity. And private funding has been provided last year, and quite a number of private therapists have been procured. But in my view, the standing operating procedure model that the HSE adopted was struck down by the courts. And the rationale behind it was to prioritise establishing the needs of children rather than providing the diagnosis immediately. Why? To ensure a quicker route to intervention services. It's estimated at the moment that up to 30%, this is what I've been informed by the HSE, 30% of assessments, up to 30% have been identified as not having a disability. So it's about how do we allocate the resources more effectively and in a targeted way to the children that require those services as quickly as possible. That is the objective that we have to focus in on. What will enable us to do that in the short term more effectively than it currently is the case? Because up to 90 hours at the moment, between 37 and 90 hours could be the period of time frame for an assessment in need at the moment. There's finite capacity in terms of therapists out there, whether they're in the private sector or in the public sector. Yes, we have to create more third level places, which we did and we're going to do more of. I think we have to facilitate more recruitment of therapists from overseas, and I think CORE and the regulatory body needs to be flexible in that regard. And that's a general problem with mutual recognition of qualifications, because we do need to supplement our own development of graduates through our third level system with graduates from overseas to get a higher number in assessing and, crucially, providing services to children. In education, you can see a line of sight in terms of when we, allocating the resources and so on, getting visibility over the provision of services. We're not quite there yet, and I've acknowledged in Dublin we've issues with some school places. And I won't be happy until 100% of children are looked after in terms of a school place for September. But there's an issue with therapists, and there has been. That's why we've moved to an education model in terms of special schools and to commence with that, and then to expand beyond that, and then to support the community teams as well. But in the short term, there are choices that we can take to enable therapists to get to children more quickly and to be used more optimally than currently is the case for children. That is the case I am making in terms of why I think we need legislative change, along with a range of other measures also. Not to take away rights, but to provide services to children.
Well, Taoiseach, I listened carefully when you said the issue is not one of resources but one of capacity, and then you threw out a number of hypothetical ways in which capacity could be addressed. But your government hasn't done anything to address capacity. I sat yesterday with two desperate mothers in my own constituency, desperate to get school places for their children. And you've said about school places, again, this is shameful, the failure of government on school places for children with additional needs. You know what the two mothers said to me? They said, why doesn't the government upskill us? Why don't we use the resource of all those parents who have fought so hard for so long and had to struggle so hard to get places, to get therapies, to get assessments of need in the first place for their children. Let's look at upskilling, a programme of upskilling, and that's what they're telling me. Otherwise, Taoiseach, your government will continue to fail. I'm looking at the letter Deputy Kelly got. 7% of assessments of need carried out within the time frame. 93% failure rate. That is shocking. And I'm asking Taoiseach, will you meet Cara Darmody today? Will you hear from her the constructive proposals that she has?
Thank you, Deputy.
Based on her own lived experience in her own family, will you hear from her what your government can constructively do to address that capacity shortfall?
Taoiseach.
So, Deputy, in terms of, you mentioned special education there. Special class enrolment has doubled. Doubled in 5 years. So we've gone from about 9,000 to 19,000. Now, what is that saying? It's revealing the exponential growth in the number of children requiring special needs provision and services. And resources has expanded accordingly in terms of both the number of classes, SNAs, special teachers, and funding for extra classrooms and so on in the special needs area. So if you just, any objective person assessing what has been happening in special education, while not saying we're there yet, would have to acknowledge the very significant growth and expansion, rightly so. I'm absolutely committed to this, and I want to get this sorted. But that will mean taking decisions, which I anticipate will run into opposition here, as is the nature of politics. That's fair enough.
Thank you, Taoiseach.
And sorry, I've already organised and arranged,
Thank you,
and I think there's been engagement, and we will meet.
Thank
I've met
you,
Cara
Taoiseach.
before.
Deputy Cian O'Callaghan of the Social Democrats.
Like, share, and subscribe, and let us know your thoughts in the comments. We'd love to hear from you.